This is Yusef here, and this is to canonwired, and concerning Douglas Wilson, but also the Western interpretations of the afterlife. Now, I tried to make this video very early this morning, just before I went to sleep, but it didn't upload, didn't publish. I had left a comment on his video. He said, "Did Christ?" The video is titled, "Did Christ Descend into Hell or Hades?" And he says the Anglo-Saxon word hell is the same as Hades, and I mentioned no, hell, because he said hell spelled H-E-L. Well, I've made numerous videos saying that no, that's a Nordic goddess. And he talked about hell or Hades having different levels, that there was basically a paradisical form of Hades, which was Elysium, and Elysium is the paradise of the Latin Romans, pagan Romans. And then he said there's a suffering place of Hades. I don't know where Hades has any paradise in it. And this is all assumptions and inferences from the various things that are in the New Testament. And he also comments on all souls going back to God, and he says Sheol, but he's not saying, he says Sheol, but trying to mean Sheol. So I got I won't read the whole comment that I left. And he said, "Thanks for letting us know Orthodoxy has all the answers. We missed the memo." That's what canonwired replied, who has all these videos of Douglas Wilson. Now, let me try to do this as short as I can. Eastern Orthodoxy, well, the church believes that all souls go back to God, and that we all are in the presence of God in the next realm, the afterlife. That's why English words like heaven and hell, when people ask me, do you believe in heaven or hell, I have to say no, because the concepts are so different than what the historic ancient church believed. If you look at every reference to the judgment of God, to Hades, Gehenna, Tartarus, Abraham's bosom, heaven, paradise, anything referring to the afterlife, negative or positive, or any judgment, you'll see that all of it, when you know what the ancient church believed, every bit of it makes sense. There's no contradictory answers, or this seems to contradict, because the Orthodox idea is all the souls go back to God. And being in the presence of God, being in the presence of love, and truly loving it is ecstasy. Being in the presence of God, or in the presence of love, because we say God is love, is torment. God doesn't torture people in a pit of fire, but also the illusion that's given for the Holy Spirit is fire. So standing before God is like, it can be either be a refining fire, burning away the dross, continually purifying and magnifying and glowing bright, basically with the energies of God, or it can be a furnace and be torment. But it's your heart in towards God. It's the difference between a contrite heart and and people who are prideful and arrogant. And if you know that teaching, and then you read the Bible, because the Christian faith, the Christian teaching in the church came before the writings in the Bible. And the people who wrote the Gospels and the letters, they were Christian writers writing to Christians for Christians to read. And as we know as we read in the Gospels, not all the stories are in the Gospels. So they would already know this view of the afterlife while reading it, and it makes sense. But you hear Protestants describe it, and it's them trying to find out about the afterlife exegesis rather than the Holy Spirit revealing it to the church. As for not getting the memo, there were originally there were 3 C's: Antioch, Alexandria, and Rome. After the First Council of Nicaea, Constantinople and Jerusalem was added. Why was Jerusalem added? Because after 70 AD, the church was crushed, and after the Bar Kokhba revolt, there was no more remnant in there, so it had to be restored. And Constantinople, the line does not come from Byzantium; it comes from Ephesus, which is where it said, just like today, the Antiochian Orthodox Church of Antioch is displaced in Damascus. Did not get the memo. Okay, so Rome, starting in the 5th century, started innovations. They took on Augustine's idea of original sin, which was not known in any other part of the Christian world. In the 11th century, I believe 11th or 12th century, Anselm of Canterbury came up with the idea of blood atonement, of this idea of that this judicial view of salvation, and that by 1054, before Anselm, it got to the point where Rome had changed the creed, had claimed that the Pope was the bishop of all the earth. It had made so many strange things, had taken the view of the afterlife and divided it into categories of paradise, purgatory, and hell, and it done some odd things. And in Constantinople, they were fed up with it by about 900, and Photius replied, but it wasn't until 1054 that there was an excommunication, and the 4 C's on one side sided against Rome, and Rome sided against them. It was a dual excommunication called the Great Schism. Well, about 500 years after the Great Schism, 500 years of the Great Schism, you have the Protestant Reformation. So you are the children of Rome. You have the heresies of Jesus dying as a blood atonement to pay off the wrath, or to appease God, or whatever it is. I mean, it's so unbiblical, it's not even funny. And then you have original sin, which is created by Augustine. So, not getting the memo. If you read the Gospels, why wouldn't you naturally ask yourself, how did we get these? And look who was directly after them and what the ancient church believed. The view of hell that the Eastern Orthodox Church, or heaven, or whatever, the view of the afterlife the Eastern Orthodox Church holds, everything the prophets, the saints ever wrote in the Bible makes complete sense and all mesh together totally perfectly. And they didn't do this on, I mean, it's not as if somebody sat down and figured this out to try to make them all fit. This was just a belief. But now we see people like Douglas Wilson, who's just spouting opinion. Where's the authority in that? Whereas this is the teaching that the church has always held. This is what it is. It's his, and you go to another Protestant pastor who's probably of the same type, stripe, and color of Protestantism he is, and he'll give a different answer. And all the Protestants will have totally. Is the church split like that? Are there no common dogmas and doctrines? The Eastern Orthodox Church only, I mean, we speak of the the councils and the creeds, but on things that are so primitive that the church holds and has always held, and I mean it's very odd. So this is the byproduct of sola scriptura, even though Protestants don't hold sola scriptura because they still have Anselm's blood atonement and Augustine's original sin, and not to mention Calvin's 5-point tulip thing, which started at Calvin and then went into his followers that really expanded it. So, to canon wired, the Eastern Orthodox view of hell is we all go back to God, and God does not torture people in a pit of fire or anything. That the torment is being in the presence of God and being against Him. And you can see how the scholastics of the Western church that had fallen into the Dark Ages separated these out, and then they came up with purgatory, and you can escape purgatory and all this kind of stuff. But again, is that what does the church believe things that the church everywhere believes at all times, and that's the belief of the church, or is it that the church should have as many different opinions as people on some very basic, very important things? That's my response. It's not that you didn't get the memo, it's that you were born in the West, and they believe that all the church, that a church needs to submit to what's in the Bible, even though the Holy Spirit and the church compiled what would be a library, which is the New Testament, and said this is what's fit to be read in church. And by their authority, they rejected the Gnostic Gospels, some Gospels that may have even been earlier than what we know in the canon. We know of more letters of Paul that the church decided weren't important, that weren't going to go in. So you use our text, and yes, I know the early church fathers do talk about the four Gospels. We can know about them, but there are many disputed books like Jude. The Eastern Church will not read the Apocalypse of John in church. So it's very funny that when you look at the history, when you even read in the Bible that Christ came, the church was formed, the Holy Spirit moves through the church. 300 years later, you have writings compiled, and then all of a sudden, instead of the church being authority, there is this piece of writing that's authority. And that the churches that are basically formed by people reading the Bible and trying to form, it's upside down. So that's my comment on hell. Peace to you. May God save Serbia and Syria. And I truly feel for the Protestants, because many of them believe that God does torture people in a pit of fire, or that heaven is some weird paradise, and it's very sad. It actually makes God look like a monster, or that God was so just that He could not have any mercy, as if mercy is not a part of justice. So that's my answer. And I sent you some questions in forms of comments and in videos. Could you please answer them? Because I'd like to start a dialogue with an evangelical Christian, because there honestly are things that you guys believe that I just do not understand. And it puzzles me why you guys believe them. So I'd like to get a dialogue going with you, or with, if you know another Protestant who wants to come in on it, they're more than welcome. But I'd like to start a dialogue between me, an Eastern Orthodox Christian, and the Protestant community. Even if we agree on nothing, I still want to understand why you believe what you believe. Peace to you. May God save Serbia. And this is the sign that all the Orthodox priests do. It's ICXis, Jesus Christos. Testament. And he also comments on all souls going back to God, and he says Sheol, but he's not saying, he says Sheol, but trying to mean Sheol. So I won't read the whole comment that I left. And he said, "Thanks for letting us know Orthodoxy has all the answers. We missed the memo." That's what canonwired replied, has all these videos of Douglas Wilson. Now, let me try to do this as short as I can. Eastern Orthodoxy, well, the church believes that all souls go back to God, and that we all are in the presence of God in the next realm, the afterlife. That's why English words like heaven and hell. This is Yusef here, and this is to canonwired, and concerning Douglas Wilson, but also the Western interpretations of the afterlife. Now, I tried to make this video very early this morning, just before I went to sleep, and he talked about hell or Hades having different levels. That there was basically a paradisical form of Hades, which was Elysium, and Elysium is the paradise of the Latin Romans, pagan Romans. And then he said there's a suffering place of Hades. I don't know where Hades has any paradise in it. And this is all assumptions and inferences from the various things that are in the New Testament. But it didn't upload, didn't publish. I had left a comment on his video. He said, the video is titled, "Did Christ Descend into Hell or Hades?" And he says the Anglo-Saxon word hell is the same as Hades, and I mentioned no, hell, because he said hell spelled H-E-L. Well, I've made numerous videos saying that no, that's a Nordic goddess. And